Hey, welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast. My name is Mike Indovina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Steve Pardo, and if you're not familiar with Steve, he is a composer who makes music for video games, film, and TV. He's worked on projects such as Rock Band VR, Dance Central, Fantasia Music Evolved, and Fortnite Festival. He's also scored music for networks such as Netflix, Adult Swim, and IFC. And in today's episode, we dive deep into the world of video game music. And we've had some other people on the podcast before who've talked about video game music, but never have we really gone this deep into the behind the scenes of how you can take that music that people are creating and then actually implement it and integrate it into the projects. But not only that, but like also understanding the real scope of work involved in this stuff. Like what kind of work is going into the planning, what is going into the drafting stages of it, the production side, the revision stage. Like we get deep into all of that stuff. And Steve shares so much great information here. He's really someone who is more of like a project manager who also does all of the composing and the integration of the music. He's really mapping it all out. So he comes into this interview with a wealth of knowledge of exactly what needs to go into it. He's not just someone who's taking a lot of instructions and just making music. He's like really mapping out the strategy. And because of that, I think that it gives us a lot of insight into the various fields within the gaming music industry that people might be interested in pursuing. You know, if you're someone who loves just making music, loves scoring things, there's a lot of different things that he talks about here that I think you could be using your music for. So in this interview, we definitely get into the composing side of things and the music development side of things. We also get into how to get into the gaming music industry. We talk about programming music for games, things like interactive versus generative music systems and what that looks like. We get into AI's role with all of this kind of stuff as well. There's just so much that we go into. And I think that if you are remotely interested in making music for video games, or you don't want to just be like the typical musician working on songs wanting to be a rock star, if you want to find ways to utilize your creativity and make music outside of that traditional rock star world, this is an amazing interview. I think you're going to really like this one. So let's just jump right into it. Steve Pardo, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, Mike. It's really great to meet you and appreciate you having me on. Yeah.
Thank you. For people who might not be familiar with you and who you are, what you do, what kind of projects you've worked on, can you give us that background?
Sure thing. So my main jam is video game music. I've been in the game industry for just under 20 years now, which is crazy to say. It was my first gig out of college, and I was initially working with the good folks at Harmonix Music Systems, in Boston, Massachusetts, made known for games such as Guitar Hero, Rock Band, the Dance Central franchises. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. My first actual title shipping a game was music and sound design for the Beatles Rock Band. And then my career just kind of went on from there. I'm a musician, I'm a composer, I'm a jazz musician. So really quickly kind of met people that just needed some original music, and I found that part of my career to grow pretty quickly. So scored a lot of indie titles and then eventually some AAA titles, Fantasia Music Evolved being one of those, Moonbreaker. Right now I'm helping out with Fortnite. So my career's kind of gone through lots of different phases, but music, sound design for games has been the constant for sure.
Was the goal to always get into that industry?
Not exactly. No, I think like a lot of musicians, coming out of high school, the dream was, for me particularly, it was, jazz saxophone, move to New York City and play at all the jazz clubs and experimental ambient noise jazz, small group kind of stuff. That's still sort of like where my musical heart is in that space, like psych rock jazz sound design music, that kind of thing. And I have a few, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I have a few crews that I'm fortunate enough to play with, and we do get to still do that. I get to fulfill that alternate life here in Nashville, Tennessee for, a good bit of my free time, which has been amazing since we moved here. But yeah, that was what I thought I'd be doing full time. So once I was in school and I graduated with my performance degree, jazz performance saxophone at the University of Miami, I was figured I would, get my master's degree doing the same. And my saxophone professor at the time, Gary Keller at Miami, recommended, hey, Steve, I noticed that you're recording a lot of music and producing a lot in Logic, and you're arranging and writing. Why don't you try your hand at that? And a light bulb went off at that when he said that. I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, why should I limit myself to just playing my horn? I love playing the saxophone, I still do, but like, why would I limit myself to that in my career in the foreseeable future? So when I got my master's degree, still at the University of Miami, under Gary Lindsay, his program being studio jazz writing, I feel like I really understood more about who I was and the career path I was going to be on. So while video game music wasn't necessarily a part of that curriculum, film scoring was, orchestration was, studio production, mixing, mastering, that kind of thing. Sort of like the best of all the worlds of ways that I connected with music. So yeah, once I got out of school and the need was there for someone like me in the game industry, which is that's its own story, but like the interview process went pretty smoothly. I was like ready for that job, even though I wasn't like, I didn't anticipate. I mean, like, yeah, to answer your question more forwardly, the idea of there being music / sound jobs in video games was like, I don't know, like not a thing. Like it wasn't something that anyone ever talked about. And this is like 2008, right? Like 2007, 2008 was not a thing that, you would go to school for at the very best. You would not, but at the very least, even thinking as a kid, like that's not for anyone. No one actually does that, right? It's just, there's like 5 people in the world that do that and they're all in Japan, right? No, there's nobody here that actually does that. And you can't make a career out of that. So when the job opportunity came up, I was a little flabbergasted. I'm like, yeah, I want that job, right? Why? Who wouldn't? So sort of like a stroke of luck, but I seized on it and then haven't let up since.
Of course. My impression of that world is that it's still very corporate and maybe a little trickier to get into than being someone who's going to record bands, right? Like if you're recording bands, you can go to a club, you can find new bands and pitch your services very easily. Whereas in the gaming world, there's a lot of businesses that are running these these operations, and it's all very like far away from the public. So like getting into that world, how do you get your foot in those doors? How do you know where to even look for that kind of stuff and who to be meeting and all that kind of stuff to get your foot in the door? Because I imagine that running a small basement studio making video game music isn't necessarily going to be the busiest business at first,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good start to do that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think a lot of people do resonate with what you're saying, that this seems so far away, right? It seems like so siloed off, and in a lot of cities it is. Like I live in Nashville, there's hardly a game scene here, right? And when I say that, I specifically mean game developers. There's not game developers really in Nashville, Tennessee, but there are a ton in places like New York, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin. That's sort of, maybe, I mean, there's more, but those are like some central hubs for game developers. So if you're not in one of those cities, I totally, like it seems so far away, and it's not like you're going to bump into somebody who might need a game composer or a sound designer. But that being said, like, I think in this post-COVID era, especially, like you can work, like developers can work with anybody all around the world. I work with people in Sweden and South America, Canada, Mexico, like every day, like on the daily, I'm working with people around the world, not just located in these cities. So to make those initial connections, it is it is a difficult process, and it's like any industry, it's who you know. So for me, I just kind of got lucky out of school with the job. From people that are interested in breaking in, there's kind of multiple ways of trying to seize those communities or seize attention within those communities. And every city should have a like game scene one way or another, at least people that are interested in it. And those are called like, game audio meetups or game jams. Like there's these community events that are ways for people to get to meet each other and to know each other. I would seek those out for sure, just to like, at the very least, feel out what's it like to be in the scene. Who are the people that are working actively? Who are the people that are interested in this scene? And like, what's the vocabulary, right? What are the tools people are using? What kind of games are out there that might need some audio? Just to get more familiar with the scene. But then like making your own music, making your own sounds, even if it's not within games, and marketing yourself in any way that even is like, hey, I'm interested in doing video games. If your sounds are good, if your music is good, that's kind of like a minimum viable product for anybody interested in working in games. If your sounds and music are good and fit a certain project, you don't really need that much. That's sort of the secret. You don't need specific industry experience to get work. Like if you're the right candidate for the job, you could be the one that gets the gig. And we could talk more about like those steps if you'd like, but like that's sort of the secret is like you could be spending your entire career in the music industry recording bands, being in a band, playing music, being an artist, and then stumble across an opportunity and all of a sudden you're writing music for a game.
Totally. Yeah. And I think a big part of that is just making music, it's like not waiting for that kind of stuff to come to you. It's keeping busy. It's, just like someone's going to write 1,000 songs to have one hit. It's like, you got to do the same with cues and scores and stuff like that. Like you got to just keep working on that craft and being ready for those opportunities so that when they do come, you're ready for it and you can capitalize on it.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, like so often whenever I'm scouting for help, because I take on a lot of projects and need a lot of help, right? So I'm actively hiring people all the time. It feels like one of the things I'm always looking for is like, can I see your reel? Can I see a demo of your work? Can you show me examples of what you've done? Not necessarily needing to see game audio or game like experience specific examples. It's like just show me your music. Just show me the sounds you're making. And if you're making excuses for like, I don't have any game audio experience, I don't have things to show. It's like, that's not true. You can show anything. Just like whoever you are and whatever you love to do, put that out there and be proud of it. And that sculpting that reel, if you will, does take some time. So I don't want to like say it's easy. It's not, but it takes a little bit of focused energy and making something that's presentable and looks great. That's kind of all you need once you make those initial connections and have something to share to get up and running.
Absolutely. Well, I love what you said there just about like just having good music. Like I think that's a big thing because, going back to your other point about just being the right person for the right job, it's like an example I can think of is there's that artist that goes by the name of Owl City. His name's Adam Young. And it's like very poppy, like, synthy stuff. And like Apple ended up hiring him to do all the ringtones afterwards because they liked what he did with his music, and it's
it was the right sound.
So it's just kind of right sound for what they're looking for, right? So, there's something to be said for just like, making music and getting it out there, and when you're the right person for the right job, you're gonna land it. So, definitely.
Yeah, sometimes it's really that simple. Yeah. I mean, and there are obvious like gaps within that are like more technical, and for people that if you find yourself interested in the more technical aspect of this, scope of work, if you will, like getting into the game engine stuff, audio middleware implementation, if you thrive on that kind of workflow, that's like so much of the open positions that are available. It's like people that not just like dabble it, but excel, and like somebody excels in mastering, somebody excels in recording, in sound design, Foley. Like those are kind of the more, in your educational institutions, there are tracks there, but like implementation within a game engine and being really good at it is like, you don't need to be an audio engineer or someone that knows how to code to fulfill that need. So if you're someone that just likes hooking everything up and making that suite of audio that already exists like really sing, that's another track too. Yeah.
Very cool. So then, what does a typical project consist of for you?
Yeah. So I tend to be thrown into the mix of like literally every part of it, and so I get the luxury to kind of pick and choose what elements of each project I actually want to be a part of, right? And usually I'd say 90% of the time I'm choosing the music part, obviously, of just scoring. And then if I have the luxury to actually implement it myself as well, I would choose that as well. Because I feel like scoring and recording and designing the music system and then also implementing, getting your audio and your music into the actual game itself is sort of an art unto itself that I just love. I love that creative flow, and it's been something I've been doing almost the entirety of my career. It's like, sort of my happy place, if you will. So if I get to choose the aspects of the process that I want my hands in, that it would start there for sure. After that, I do get a lot of like audio direction work where I'm taking on the leadership role of audio in a project. And in those cases, I'm hiring sound designers. I do sound design, and I will deliver like sound effects as needed, but it's not my specialty, So I know a wealth of very talented sound designers, and I'm always looking for more as well, if you're interested in that. So, and when I say sound design, I specifically mean like sound effects creation. So that's like, either recording new sounds from around the house or outside, Foley, field recording, that kind of thing, as well as designing, synthesizing or, combining unique samples together to form a new sound. The Ben Burt thing, right? Like just combining organic audio together to make something new.
But it's not. But just to be clear here, like we're not talking about sound design. We're not talking about any sort of like musical element necessarily.
I know. Yeah,
like,
it's a conflated term, right? Yeah. So when you talk about sound design within a media landscape, you're talking more about the sound effects. But yeah, we certainly, as a composer, I'm doing sound design, synthesis, and whatnot all the time, every day, like with almost every project. So yeah, there's sound design and music, but then specifically sound design is a career path, or like, someone on the audio roster that like you have sound designers and they're focused more on the sound effects track. So yeah, when you're in an audio direction position or audio lead position, you're in charge of the entire suite of that: music, sound design, voiceover. Sometimes voiceover involves actually like finding the voiceover house and helping with casting and editing, mixing, mastering. On top of that, integration and implementation, all of that. Like you're maybe not, getting your hands dirty in every aspect of that flow, but you could be the one managing it. So that's a big job. Yeah, and then the technical side, a lot of what I learned at Harmonix Music Systems, doing the Rock Band games and whatnot, a lot of music design, music gameplay design, where the music will not only just be a backing track, right, or just the thing happening, it is the game itself. In the case of Rock Band and Fantasia, Dance Central, the music is driving the game, right? And that's showing up nowadays in Fortnite Festival, which we're helping out with as well. It's like a big mode in Fortnite that is more of like a music stage. There's this one mode called Jam Mode where you're combining different tracks, licensed tracks, like songs on the radio or Spotify, whatever kids do these days, songs that exist in the real world by artists, combining like stems of like, say, a track from SZA with like another track from Rolling Stones, taking the drums from the Rolling Stones and the vocals from SZA and combining them, right? Like, yeah, it's kind of magic. So that kind of thing where the music is the game, that's been in my blood, since I got started. So sometimes I'll take those learnings and move those over to a more traditional game. So, to drive rhythmic aspects. We're actually doing that right now on an unannounced game where I'm trying to, pitch to them, hey, if this combat system was driven off of music, you could have some really cool, not just musical stingers, but the visuals can line up too, and you'll feel really powerful because the drums will hit right when the attack hit, that kind of thing. So those are technical challenges and exercises that not everyone's familiar with. So part of my job is to educate people why that's powerful and then also drive the actual technical execution of that.
That's very cool. Yeah, it sounds like you're like an audio project manager for a lot of these projects. And yeah, it sounds, I mean, man, just from what you said there, I think you uncovered a lot of different fields in the video game audio industry that people can be looking at, and it's really interesting. Like it's not just some people just think it is the music or the effects, but there's so much more that goes into that.
Like any industry, there's always more than meets the eye, right? And thankfully in games, like, yeah, you're right. Like there's a lot of needs, and every need has its own specialty, right? So yeah, if one of those needs sounds interesting to you, like we could use some help. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned like implementing the music system. Is that like when you say that, are you talking about like figuring out the back end of how that music actually gets like coded in the game so that people like, interact with it, or like what does that look like?
So let me back up just a little bit. In every game, with every game project, there's a game engine. So you have Unity, you have Unreal. Those are kind of the two big ones, and then there's a few other smaller ones like Game Maker or just like if you're working with a relatively large studio like Bungie, they might have their own game engine. Within a game engine is like literally everything: the art, the programming, a little bit of audio, animations, code. Like it houses all of that in order to power the game that you end up playing, on the actual delivered console or PC or Mac, whatever. Outside of that, there most likely will be a supplementary tool called an audio middleware. Audio middleware is real-time software that is almost like a DAW, like a fancy audio environment for people like us to get our sounds in game and sculpt the tech behind that to drive it not only just to match whatever might be happening in the game, like game events or parameters that are moving up and down. If you're in a combat, like if you're losing health, maybe a parameter goes up and you can drive the music a certain way. But the mix, like the real-time mix, so you actually have like plugins kind of running in the background that ensures that you're, if you have multiband or real-time compressor, because we need something that runs in real time in order for it to render sonically pleasing. This isn't a movie. This isn't like a 2-track. This is all software that's running in real time. So that this audio environment, audio middleware, really helps us with that job. So a lot of the times, and the main tools there are WWise, Audio Kinetics WWise, and then there is Fmod. So if you're familiar with those, then you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. But a lot of the times, if I'm lucky, when I'm in starting up on a new project, they're aware of this, and they'll be like, yeah, we're using Wise, or yeah, we're using Fmod. And if that's the case, it's like, great, this makes my job a lot easier. I can do 90% of the designing myself within Wise, let's say, and sculpt the music system to like behave a certain way. And all I need to ask the developers is like, hey, I'm going to give you these events or these parameters. It's sort of like, a MIDI controller, which is just a knob and a couple buttons, right? Like one of these like little, what are these called? The monogram, where it's a big knob and it's a couple buttons. That's all I'm asking the developers to do. It's like, hey, every once in a while, like if the player gets hit, press a button or turn this knob if the health is going up or down. And, taking those events and driving that in an intelligent way within the audio middleware allows for me to have the freedom to kind of create and craft that audio experience without needing too much help from an actual, engineer on the developer side.
Gotcha. So are you making all of this stuff to picture then? Like, how do you know what kind of cues you're supposed to be making?
Yeah. So it's usually, I'm the type of person that likes to be part of the implementation side of things. So I usually, when I hop onto a new project, request access to the build or the actual like repo where the software, the game engine and all the tools are, right? Even if I'm not working for some reason or not, for some reason I'm not implementing, I still would request access to the game itself so that I can see it, I can do screen captures, and if I'm implementing, I can put my sounds in and test them and see it to the picture. Like being in the actual game and understanding it holistically is the best way to work on these types of things. But if that's not the case, if we don't have access to, like there's another project I'm working on right now where that's not the case, all we have access to is like screen captures that are being tossed to me, like, hey, we got this new animation. Here's what it looks like. And they'll toss me a video of it. It's like, well, that helps, so we can at least score like you would a TV show or a film. And so the sound effects, we are still, scoring. It's probably the best like parallel, it's like we have the video in our DAW and we're crafting the sound effects or crafting the music as if it was a TV show or something, and then delivering assets over that we know will be compatible for their game engine. But that's not my preferred way to work. It's so much easier. It's so much better if we're actually getting our hands dirty in the game engine and working on it ourselves. And then we don't have to request, new captures every time something's updated. It's like I can see it for myself, right? So yeah, I guess one point to make is like there is a little bit of a learning curve there. Of like if you do end up getting one of these jobs, like understanding how to use a Perforce repo and the kind of baseline level understanding of a game engine, but that's something you can pick up in a matter of months, not years. Like it's there's plenty of resources online to find out how to use Wise and use Unreal. And they've done a really, because obviously those companies want you to use those tools, right? So they want you to be able to get onboarded pretty quickly.
That's very cool. I'd imagine that there's like a ton of different cues and scores and that kind of stuff that you're putting together to make this all work. It's not just, like you got a list of like, here's 15 songs I need to make. It's like all these little effects and little stings and stuff like that, right?
Oh, for sure. So yeah, very rarely is it like we need 15 songs. It's like usually it's like, okay, we got one cue that needs to transition to, like a combat cue that has 3 phases, and each one of those phases could have, 3 different intensity states. And there needs to be transitions in between each of those phases, and then an intro and an outro, and then it transitions out of the outro into an ambient state, which will only last for 15 seconds before it goes to a results screen. Like that whole flow is very much so what I'm used to. That being said, I just did a score for a new expansion for Grim Dawn, which is like a game I've been like a part of since it came out. This is their 3rd expansion coming up. And all they ever ask for, which is awesome, is music. They're just like, give us like what you said, 15 cues of music, make it sound great. We'll handle the rest. Those are really rare, but they exist. Yeah, like a lot of composers that I know, that is how they operate. Is like all they get asked is like, hey, write some tracks, and God bless them. That's fantastic. For not everyone gets that kind of luxury, but when I do get asked to do, like in the Grim Dawn's case, it's freeing and it's fun. It's a different flow.
Yeah, I imagine like that one scenario that you gave of like the fight scene with all these different intensities and all these other like I was just adding up in my head all of like the different files that would go into this, and it's a lot, and it kind of made me think that like, in the world of recording bands, you do your work, you write a song or you help them mix it, and then there's the revision process, and like there's so much back and forth on cleaning that up. What does the revision process look like for this kind of thing? Because when you have like, let's say 30 clips of audio for one scene, like I imagine that you can't be super picky about every single thing, or am I wrong?
Yeah, you have to be fairly, what's the right word? So before we hop on a project, let me think of it this way. Like a lot of planning is involved before you start writing any music. You have to understand the scope of every project and every system and every need, at a relative granular level. Because if you just like start writing and like all this, like that entire spec, if you start writing and you start making every stem of every intensity of every phase of every combat, for every song, you're locking yourself into sort of a known system at too early of a stage. So, the planning phases of, the seasons of development and, when music, like what needs to be heard with the music at each phase is part of the art of, you call it project managing, yourself as a musician or a sound designer on a project. So like right now I'm entering into a phase of the project where all I'm doing is concepting, sort of like an artist concept art. You're just sketching broad strokes, like what is the sound of this game? What is the feeling of this game? What's the story? What's the culture? What are the gameplay elements that are going to be required from the music? And you just sort of, all you're worried about is the sound, and all you're worried about is the instruments that you're going to use, assuming that none of the music that I'm writing is actually going to make it into the shipping game. It's just like, what's the feeling, right? And then you can talk about what is that feeling in the context of the tech that might be needed, the flow from one song to the next, and the stems, and like how is it going to interact with the player and the story? What's the flow? And then with those two things sort of ironed out as the time goes on, you sort of be like, okay, so actually we need to use these instruments for this character, and we need to have these phases for combat. And we need to make sure that tech gets built in this way so that we can drive things smoothly into and out of combat into ambience. And then that might take 5 months. And let's say within those 5 months, none of the music you wrote is actually going to make it into the game, right? Understandably, because it's just like, it's impossible, right? It's all just playing and you're testing stuff out. But then once you hit the ground running and all those questions have been answered, most of the music you write after that is going to ship. And like the polishing process is kind of gonna happen as the music gets written, because a lot of the trust, you start to have this thing where the developers trust you, your leadership team trusts you, and you trust you because you've already answered a lot of these fundamental questions about what the project needs. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying there isn't further revision, but the risk of delivering shippable audio and music goes way down because you've already answered a lot of those difficult questions. So there is still like what I'll often, and this might be more familiar to some your listeners, you do like an initial, now we're talking about like past that initial pre-production stage. You're in production and putting music in game. A lot of the music that you might put in game will still have like rough samples, rough passes of instruments, like I'm not going to record an orchestra while I'm writing the music, I'm going to use Spitfire samples and whatnot. But replacing those within, your stems, like you start to plan that out as you're writing. Okay, I'm going to write this way. I know I'm just using Spitfire for now, but a year from now, once all the music is written, we're going to go to, Ocean Way with the Nashville Recording Orchestra and replace all of these samples. So it's like you get used to like organizing your sessions that way. Now, for me, I know this is primarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is like your podcast is called, it's mastering and it's mixing, right? So
yeah, I came up with the name as initially the website was supposed to be an online mastering website. And so MasterYourMix made sense as a mastering service. And then I started making a blog that was talking about, how to make better mixes to help people get to the mastering process. And then it became like, well, you're mastering the process of mixing. So it kind of just was a play on words, but it works.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's good to know. But, like attention to that part of the detail is important to me. So only speaking for myself, I usually do my own mixes, and I've shaped this room and the gear that I have in order to do that, So I deliver, this is my approach. And we were just talking about sketches and using samples. I always ask myself, if this ships now, let's say I don't get to record that orchestra, I don't ever want to have a mixing game that isn't shippable. So everything that goes in game, I'm like, this could ship, and I need to be proud of it. So I'm always mixing and trying to get to like master quality deliveries with everything that goes into game. So that, it's a little bit extra effort, but it's worth it in my opinion.
Definitely. Very, very cool. Well, I was curious to ask too, like on your website, you define the work that you do as music for interactive and generative audio systems. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that interactive and generative, although related, can also mean two very different things, right? Can you define what that means for the audience then?
Yeah, it's a subtle difference. The way I like to think of it is interactive music is mostly composed, written out music. The stems that you're hearing, even if it's interactive, it's changing and procedural and evolving with whatever may or may not be happening on screen, is intentional, like fairly intentional, and it to the composers and what they had in mind for what is going into your ears and what's represented on screen. As soon as you start getting into the more generative music, the composer's hands have started lifted off the piano, if you will, where it's more about the combination of instruments and timbres, harmonically, melodically, rhythmically, like whatever might happen, it's more improvisational. The system that you've designed is intelligently combining, fragments of audio to make something relatively new, but intentional to what's happening on screen and what the player is doing and engaging with. So depending on the game, not every system needs a generative system, right? Not every game needs interactive system. Some games can just have a 2-track, like I was saying with Grim Dawn. It just needs music, right? Doesn't need anything much more intelligent than that. But a game like the example I always come back to is No Man's Sky, which is inherently procedural. It's inherently being generated on the fly. It made sense for that game to have a procedural music system. Now, of course, the artist still is going to put into that system and into the game, into the music, like audio that is appropriate. It's not like there's going to be that many surprises that it's going to go outside of certain boundaries that are predefined. Like it'll stay within, Brian Eno kind of mentality of like, okay, it's like fragments of audio that are being combined, and there's a little bit of a gesture that goes this way, so the music will go that way, rhythmically, sonically, melodically.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So we have a lot of tools to do that, and the most recent one that people are getting really excited about is Metasounds within Unreal. It's almost like having like a Max MSP engine within your game engine. So if you're into that kind of thing and you like, not just with samples, but like actual synthesis, like you want to do some real-time synthesis in your game for one reason or another, like we have that availability now. It's really, really powerful. And it's not just for music; it's for sound design as well. It's like it's just we're at a new phase of We're in, kind of in the golden era of audio tools for games right now. It's pretty exciting.
Man, that's crazy. Like asking that question, I kind of thought that you were going to say that like the generative side of it was just that it just kind of figured, like sort of what you were saying, where it's combining different elements. But I kind of thought of it more as like an example of being like, if I'm playing a level and I'm stuck on that level longer than someone else, and the music has to figure out a way of keeping itself fresh as opposed to looping. Whereas someone who maybe it's faster at that level, here's a smaller clip or something like that. But the way you described it, I immediately was kind of picturing, if someone's swiping one way, that maybe the mix is doing something, like panning or something like that. And that just adds like this whole other level of complexity. And yeah, definitely very cool. I could see how like it would be like a DAW operating in the background to manage all of that stuff.
Yeah, like Ableton kind of, a huge patch that has like a ton of different content that could possibly be, a matrix of content that, depending on what the input is, could select this drum patch with this melody or this bass line, this harmony, this keyboard patch, changing the tempo, down pitching, a bunch of different things. Yeah, like it's all data driven. So the world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want. Like it is, that's what I mean. Like we have so much, almost overly, too much that, of options that we could do for a game that sometimes it's hard to decide. But, it all starts with the music. It all starts with like what the game needs, what the story needs. Try not to get too overwhelmed up front. Just just close your eyes and what do you hear? And then go from there. Yeah, I think that like there is a middle ground between interactive and generative music that sort of touches on what you're saying. A generative music system doesn't have to be completely hands off. It can be like just literally you're randomizing some stems, right? Like that's actually kind of an out of the box feature within Wise, is that you can just cycle through X amount of tracks per stem. So like the drum stem could have 4 different takes. I did this game called Chariot, I want to say like 10-ish years ago. And it was a lot of what you were saying, where it's like the player could be in this level for a long time. And the budget for the soundtrack was not very high. So it's more of an economic decision to be like, okay, well, we're going to just like, instead of just taking one pass with the violin, have them record like 2 other passes and improvise for those 2 other. So then we have some variation. Maybe the violin's improvising while the flute is playing the melody. Maybe the flute is improvising while the violin's playing the melody. Maybe no one's playing the melody. Maybe both are playing the melody. And there's just that combination matrix across not just those 2 instruments, but also percussion and bass and guitar. You start to get relatively, I mean, not infinite, but like seemingly feeling infinite amount of variation to solve that problem.
That's crazy, man. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking of like, like Rock Band or something like that, where on the surface it might sound simple. You're playing through a song, but you're going to have people that are messing up and hitting things at the wrong time, and it's got to react to that, right? So yeah, that's very cool. What role, like with all of this stuff, I imagine that AI is playing a big role behind the scenes in terms of like making it work. But with AI music becoming so prevalent as well these days, like how do you see that being infused in what you're doing and working with those generative systems?
Yep. So I worked with an AI studio right around COVID era, where we were trying to figure this out and like trying to see how AI generative music could be integrated into a game engine. And my gosh, is that a world that is still left unexplored? I still feel like, for one reason or another, that studio didn't work out financially, just, kind of wasn't the right time, or maybe it was too early. I feel like the creative potential there is still untapped, but I that's a different subject. Like that, the creative use case of AI is the good news. Is that there's like, I feel like composers have some leverage to pull that we're not pulling, and maybe one day a studio or a team will figure this out and allow for those to, like similar to how I'm talking about with meta sounds, how we have a lot of affordances there that allow for generative music, both with synthesizers and with samples or what have you. That AI music could be one of those tools that a composer is feeding data into, feeding audio samples into, and training an AI model to do something that is of the composer's intent. That's like my favorite way to think about it. AI is just a tool, right? It's just another playground for creatives. When it starts to get controversial is when where the sample data is coming from is not correctly licensed, or it's stealing, or it's just being taken advantage of in ways that are not appropriate, or virtuous, or just sort of leveraging content that was not allowed. It's pretty. That sentiment is pretty broad, both within the developer community and within the consumer community. Like I feel like it's pretty broadly understood that like AI is kind of a 4-letter word if it had 4 letters, But so there's good news in that. There's a lot of fear around AI taking jobs within the audio community, at least within games, and I'm here to say that nothing to worry about. We got a ways away before I think that's going to be a problem. I've never been in the room with a developer where they've requested or thought about for a split second using AI music, ever. That's today. Maybe 2, 3 years, 4 years from now, that might change. But like I said before, it's just too controversial of a topic that I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen. Now in the more creative way, in the more like a composer that is familiar with these tools and isn't filled with fear of AI being this, all-encompassing horrible thing. That's what I mean. Like there's something there that is left untapped that I think is still, on the horizon that hopefully one day we'll figure out.
For sure. Well, I think that like with anything of this size, like people are spending a ton of money to develop these games, and why would you just throw away the audio side of it, right? So when you're working with someone who actually understands the intent of the game and the feeling that the music's supposed to evoke and all that stuff, like when you have someone driving that ship of it, I think like it makes sense to have like a real composer, someone who actually cares about this stuff. And then I think you could leverage AI to some degree where, maybe you make the main theme, and like you were talking about earlier, where they get someone to play a few different passes. Maybe you could have something like that, right? Where it's like, here's the main thing that we're going for. Maybe make a couple little variations, and maybe that's a role where AI could fill and help speed up the process a little bit, but not like entirely coming up with something from scratch and replacing someone's job.
Yeah, that's, and I think that's a sentiment shared not just from within audio, like across the board, like concept artists especially. I think that's maybe the one space that I've seen AI being used almost like frivolously in the game space is like concept art, because it's going to get tossed out anyway. Like it doesn't matter. This is just to get an idea out there and let's just see what it feels like, right? Let's see what it looks like. But that's taking away a concept artist's job. Like, and that, so yes, it like looks good on paper. We got something for free, but the morale it goes way down when anything like that comes out. Every single time it's a fire that needs to be put out. So that's a good sign that like we're just not having it. The community mindset is like in the right here, and I hope that holds firm. Again, I don't mean to knock the tech. I just feel like it's really easy to abuse.
Of course. And we're starting to see that now, even in the music space too, where like there's all this AI generated stuff that's making its way on Spotify, and now you got Spotify blocking a lot of it and all that, right? So yeah, it's something to definitely consider for sure. Yeah, but I think you also bring up an interesting point too of just the idea of like morale and how important that is, and keeping people engaged with these projects that they're working on. And that kind of ties into something that I was curious to ask about too. Like I read that when it comes to composing stuff, despite the fact that there are so many great high-end sound libraries available, you still very much love to have real instrumentation in what you're doing, right?
Personally, yeah. I think it's to each their own. It's not like there's one right way or one wrong way. But for me, I'm a jazz musician. I'm used to playing in groups. I love hearing when the opportunity comes up, I love hearing my music performed by real musicians. It's a luxury. Initially, it's like it takes some convincing that it needs to be done, because everyone knows that like samples are good enough to ship for the most part nowadays. But if you can convince the stakeholders that this is a thing worth doing, and you actually get in the studio and hear the real musicians playing the music and you put it in the game, everyone notices. It's like, whoa, our game sounds, how did we have the budget for this? What's, like those sentiments start coming up. And it doesn't need to be like the most expensive recording session. Just having like a handful of musicians in a room laying a couple layers over, what you've already done, even if you leave the samples in, it makes the world of a difference. It's my favorite part of this job. Like hands down. I get emotional thinking about it. I just did it a few times over the summer, and it was some of my, memories that I'll never forget. Just hearing some of these pieces played by Nashville's finest in the best room in Nashville. It's the best part of this gig. So again, you don't always get the money, but if you do, you better seize on it, because it's so fun.
For sure, but that goes back to that morale thing, right? Like having someone like you who can actually be in control of that and experience that, like that's going to keep you jacked for working on the rest of the projects, right?
And at that point, it's like it's not about it's not about the money, right? It's like you're doing this because you love it. It's like, and man, when you're in a job where you get that feeling of like, I'm doing this because I would do this in my free time. Like that's life, man. Like when it doesn't always work like that, but if you can shape it just to maybe I can get there in August, and it works out. Woo! It's like so much fun. But also, I don't need that orchestra session to happen to sort of like get in that space. It's one of the reasons I have so many instruments here. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, right? And so part of, if you hire me, if I get asked to do your game, I'm recording my own instruments on every single soundtrack that I do. Guitars, drums. I have a violin and a cello and a trumpet, and my main instruments are saxophones and woodwind. So like you're if you hire me, you're getting that. Unless it's like an all synth thing, which like I hardly ever get asked to do all synth things. Usually it's like if it goes that way, it's like 75% synth and 25% live. But like if I can avoid the sample at all costs, I will, and I'll do it. Even if it's like my horrible trumpet playing, it's like better that there's the breath behind that instrument than, relying on a sample. But man, some of the best composers out there, like Curaine being one of them, she does record. What Lana Rain is her full name, but she does record and can score for live orchestra, but she knows how to use samples like better than anybody. Like when she's using samples, I never feel like it's a compromised output. It's always, her top quality, world-class, Grammy nominated, Grammy award level kind of, So yeah, I'm just saying for myself, that's my favorite space to be in.
For sure. Yeah. And the thing with samples too, is that like, yeah, they sound really good, but there's also, I can imagine too, like, I mean, I'm not great when it comes to a lot of the composing and doing a lot of those orchestral libraries, because there's a lot of like articulation controls and stuff like that you need to input to make it sound realistic as well.
It can be
so
finicky.
I can imagine, yeah. So I can imagine that it's finicky, and that for someone in your position who can actually play these instruments, it's probably faster to just record it, and you're going to get a more real sound anyway. So, maybe that is a better way.
At this point, I'm pretty comfortable both. I had to score. Anyone that's scored for TV knows this, that you have to move fast. That like you don't always. Sometimes it is quantity over quality, unfortunately, right? In one ear out the other. It's like, if a cue doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles, then like just get through it, right? So I did have a season where I was using samples mostly on everything, just because I needed to execute. And to your point though, like. Yes, as soon as it's like a melody that needs to evoke something, yes, I'm going to pick up something, right? Like if it needs to have emotion or movement, or like it's going between multiple articulations, it's so much easier just to pick up something. Yeah.
For sure. What does a typical timeline look like for some of these projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, like compared to TV, which is like, you're delivering a full 30-minute thing every other week, right? And that's a patient timeline. Games can go on for years, 2-3 years sometimes. So when a while ago when I was mentioning that, like those seasons of development, right, where you might first spend the first 5 months doing prototyping and just sketching and figuring that like technical questions out, that's the first stage. Then once you're in like actual production, that could be a year or 2 years of, delivering final audio and covering all of your levels and systems, narrative moments, soundtrack, all of that, that could be a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending. So that's another reason that I like prefer working in the game industry, is because that speed of 2-week deliveries is just, I mean, I tried it and I'm grateful for it. I learned a lot. Not my jam. You know, I so much more so appreciate the patience, the longer dev cycles, the ability to do revisions, the ability to, take your full soundtrack when it's ready and go into the, recording studio with an orchestra, mixing and mastering. It's more reasonable. It's more like, and I've said this before, it's more like making an album. It's that speed of like, I'm crafting something that I love and I've poured my soul into. You get to go there more often than not with the games, as opposed to like a TV show or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd imagine too that like even when you have a 2-year timeline, like there's still a level of organization and discipline to make sure that you're keeping on track, right? It's like, it's not one of those things like, just because you have 2 years to do it, you can throw it in at the end of the 2 years and, cram it in. It's not going to work at all like that.
No, it requires a lot of project management. And that's, something I'm familiar with that flow now, being in the industry, actually having worked in studios my entire career, like being a part of the development team. I'm familiar. I know the cycle. I know when a project manager, when a producer is going to get mad because something isn't in game yet. Like, yeah, we do operate with developers, like collaborate in real time with them. So their expectations are like, hey, can we get a song to for this scene in by the end of next week? And I'm like, yeah, I can get a sketch in. No problem. It might not be finished, but I can get something in for you. So yeah, there's a lot of hands-on planning involved, and good developers and good producers, the more hands-on they are, the easier you'll sleep at night, for sure. At least for me, that's what I found.
For sure. This may be like a bit of a nerdy question, but I'm always very curious about this kind of thing. I mean, as a composer, I'm imagining that you probably have so many ideas that you've written, little tags and stuff like that, that the organization on the back end must be, that's got to be a well-oiled machine to make it work so that you can find cues when you need them and recall ideas and that kind of thing. What does that look like for you?
Oh man, I don't know. I think it's,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it isn't so well-oiled.
No, I don't think so. I think it's it's quite scrappy, but I do, like anybody, I have my own like file management system. Like most musicians and artists, do a lot of voice memos, right? That's kind of where the ideas start. On the fly, if I'm in the car, if I'm in the shower, trying to, if I'm in the shower, I have to wait till I get out, and then, but like, I'll just sing something, right? Or I do a lot of cooking. I'm cooking almost every night, and I'll sing while I'm cooking, and then I'll go over to the piano, which is right there, and I'll try and voice memo something out real quick. But then it's in my voice memo ether, right? And so if I'm ever like about to score something, like, oh yeah, what was that theme? I'm scrolling through all my voice memos. Like, which one is it? Because of course I'm not like, titling it or anything.
It's like audio 1, audio 2, yeah.
yeah, July 31st, 2023. I think this is the one. Because it could be years later that I'm like, what was that thing I sang 3 years ago? But, once it's in Logic, and I use Logic, that's my main, music DAW. Once it's in there, it's okay. It's working. I use alternatives and, just make sure that like the organization is somewhat comprehensible. And then, file naming is an art unto itself with game audio. I mean, like it is with any industry, like TV too. There's a sort of a lingo that everyone kind of understands. I learned a lot with TV though, with like proper file naming, and I've carried that into the game space because I think it's a little bit more Wild West there. But if you're ever like interested in like really good file management, look at what the TV folks do. They have it figured out. For sure.
Yeah, it's all like time-stamped and everything. Yeah, it's pretty detailed.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I don't want to take any more of your time. I appreciate everything today. I mean, this has been so insightful to learn more about the behind the scenes of what goes on with these games, and not just making the music, but like understanding the guts of how this all operates. So thank you for taking the time to do this. If people want to learn more about you, or maybe even hire you or work with you, like what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, cool. Well, first, thank you so much, Mike. This has been incredible, and it's a pleasure to get nerdy and talk about the fine details here. It's a weird, it still does feel like Wild West out here in video game world. So we're, everything is sort of in progress and changing. But yeah, it's been a good chat. Thanks for all your awesome questions and everything. You can find me at stevepardo.com. You can find me at Steve Pardo on Instagram. I do have a little bit of music on Bandcamp, a lot of music on Spotify. Although I have canceled my Spotify account. I still have my music on there, but I'm on Tidal now. Tidal seems to be a reasonable place. I think it's pays a little bit more per stream or something. But anyway, yeah, thanks for having me, and hope to be in touch.
Of course, right on, man. Thank you so much. So that was my interview with Steve Pardo, and man, that just opened my eyes up to realizing how much work is actually involved in the audio side of games. Like, I always knew it was pretty intense, but to actually understand not just the composing side of things, but to understand more of the strategy and the implementation of that side of things, it's really, really fascinating, or at least to me. Maybe this is a super nerdy episode for some people, but I really love this one. But I also thought it really highlighted Steve's expertise in this industry and the level of commitment to it that he not only has, but that other people should shoot for too. He's made himself someone who is indispensable in this industry because he can do it all. He's not just focused on the composing side of things. He's understanding, okay, well, what are they going to do with this? How do I implement it? And how do I get it to work the way I want? And he's really mapping out this whole experience for the user that goes beyond just writing some music. And I think that is just really impressive. And if you're someone who is thinking about getting into this industry, it gives you some things to think about. It gives you more to research and to shoot for getting experience with than just making music. Obviously, there are people that have lots of success just making the music. And, like you talked about in this interview, you just got to create that reel of music and be working on that craft and getting good at it and having stuff ready so that when opportunity strikes, you're ready to jump on it. But if you get really good at that side of things, and then you also get good at all of this other stuff he talked about here, that just makes you so valuable for anyone who's looking to potentially work with you. So yeah, I just thought that was really, really fascinating and really opened my eyes up to how this all works and it not just being a get music done, ship it to someone, and they deal with it kind of thing. There are people who work that way, but I think, again, with what Steve does here, he really expands on his offerings and his services, which makes him that much more valuable to work with. So yeah, I certainly found that part of the conversation very, very interesting. I also thought it was really interesting to hear Steve's thoughts on AI and its role in the gaming industry, because games have always been a field where they're leaning into the technology. They're definitely ahead of their time and pushing the limits of what's possible. And so it makes sense that with AI becoming such a strong force in music, that it might find its way into the gaming world. And so it was really interesting to hear Steve's thoughts on that, both reasons for why it can be a good thing and reasons for why it's not, and why some people might want to avoid it. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this episode. I know it's a little different than a lot of our other styles of interviews where we're talking about like working on rock bands and being in the studio and that kind of stuff. But I bring guests on like Steve because I think it's really important for people to get a sense of other fields in the audio industry that you might be looking into or that you could look into, because being able to make your own music can apply to so many different things. And it's not always just about being the person on stage, right? So yeah, I thought it was really awesome. I'm so glad that Steve came on, and I hope that you found this episode really inspiring and insightful. If you did, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way you're notified about all new episodes as they go live each and every Wednesday morning. And if you're someone who is working on music, but you're still struggling to get it at that quality that you want, if you can't get those ideas that you hear in your head to sound the way you expect coming out of your speakers, that's exactly what I'd love to help you out with. And inside of my coaching program, Amplitude, that's exactly what I work on with my students. We come up with what your vision is for your music. We get clear on what it is that you want it to sound like before we even start recording. And then I walk you through the recording, editing, mixing, and mastering processes step by step, so you know exactly what steps to take. And then as you're implementing it, I'm right by your side. We're hopping on calls together. We're opening up sessions together. I'm helping you mix it. We're making sure that in the end, you're getting that sound that you want. And not only getting your music done, but you're also going to gain a simple, repeatable, easy to follow process that you can apply to every one of your songs. So you can be way more confident, you can get music done in less time, and ultimately just have more fun making music. So if you're interested in learning more about this and getting help with your music, make sure to check out masteryourmix.com/amplitude, and you can get all the details of the program there. And on that page, there's a link where you can sign up to hop on a call with me. I'd love to learn more about the music you're making. I'd love to know more about what's working for you, what's not working for you, and to see how I can help you, if I can. I only work with people who I truly believe I can help. So if you are interested in getting one-on-one help, again, masteryourmix.com/amplitude, and that's where you can sign up for that. And with that said, we're at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit masteryourmix.com.